Hello, this is us. Hello, it is us. We tonight are honored to have Brian Mantonock, the facilities coordinator of the university, and also the accessibility expert in that field. Welcome.
Thanks,
Brian.
Keith, and thanks for the invitation to be here.
Okay, could you explain to the audience what your duties are?
Sure. Yeah. So as Keith mentioned there, I serve as the Facilities Accessibility Coordinator for Facilities Management at the University of Iowa. So it is my role and responsibility to coordinate improved access on campus, especially within our physical environment on campus, and to create a more welcoming and supporting environment for all individuals, and including individuals with disabilities.
And I imagine when we talk about accessibility, it's good for everyone, whether they're non-disabled or not.
That's correct. I think we find that more and more, Keith, that as we, you know, a prime example many people use is the curb cut, you know, at a crosswalk. You know, so that not only serves, you know, makes an accessible path for somebody in a wheelchair is what people think of first, but we also think of maybe the person pushing a grocery cart or a baby stroller.
Packages.
Yes, packages, the delivery man, maybe the business person pulling his suitcase, somebody on a bicycle, you know, not having to hop. So those, we find out that accessibility really serves, you know, these features really serve a much broader range of people.
So really you're responsible for the total infrastructure of the university.
Well, I'm not really responsible for the total infrastructure. I do get involved in many aspects of infrastructure on campus.
Making it accessible.
But mainly accessibility, and mainly in regards to our academic buildings on campus.
Not the hospital.
Not so much the hospital. I do place some involvement there, but my main focus is more on what we classify as our general education fund buildings.
And the audience out there must know there's a lot of building going on. Could you give us an idea of the new amenities that the new buildings have that many of the older buildings don't have?
Sure. So yeah, as you mentioned, we have an awful lot of construction going on campus. Matter of fact, we have $1.2 billion worth of construction going on right now in the city. And you know, it's just an unprecedented amount of construction, and it's on the scale of the city of Minneapolis, the amount of construction. So it's just incredible. We've never had this much construction going on at one time here on campus. So yeah, we have several new facilities going up, as many people are aware. We have the new Hancher Auditorium facility, we have the new School of Music facility, we have a new art building replacement facility in the works.
And I'd like to remind the audience, those three structures have been in the flood of 2008, so that's why they're being rebuilt.
Yes, yeah, those three main large facilities, were all destroyed by the flood of 2008, and so it's taken this long. We're right in the midst of construction in those buildings now. Matter of fact, I think yesterday they noted that we were at the halfway point for Hancher. Wow. So we still have, like Hancher, almost 2 years before that facility will actually be open to the public. But it's taken us a long time, in designing these facilities, and as I said, we're getting right in the heart of construction now.
Brian, could you briefly give the audience an idea of what the new amenities are in the newer building?
Sure.
That the older buildings might not have yet.
Yep. I'll maybe mention, kind of some large, what some people might think is large scale and small and just minor items as well. But we're working more and more towards the universal design of facilities where we're trying to build facilities that do not marginalize anybody, that they're welcoming, supporting to all is the goal. And so we are trying to provide access, front entrance access, that the same access point is used by everybody and not marginalize somebody by requiring them maybe to go around the side of the building to use the ramp or something like that. That we want everybody entering the same place in our facilities. Some amenities, as you mentioned, one of them is hearing loops. And so a hearing loop is for individuals who are hearing impaired. And what it is, it's a technology that's been very popular in Europe, and it's been somewhat slow catching on here in the United States, but it's gaining momentum. The state of Michigan, New York, Florida are states that have been adopting this type of technology for some time. So like our New Hampshire facility is going to have a hearing loop in the auditorium. The new School of Music, I think there's maybe 3 different recital rooms that are going to have hearing loops in them. The new West Campus dormitory on the other side of campus that's going up is going to have a hearing loop in its multi-purpose room. The new art building replacement facility I mentioned earlier, it will have a hearing loop in one of its large lecture rooms. The new Papa John Biomedical Discovery Building that we're just kind of completing now, that has a hearing loop in one of its lecture halls over there. And to briefly try to explain what a hearing loop is, it's mainly a piece of copper wire going around the perimeter of a room. And that copper wire then is hooked into the audio-visual system within that room. And people with hearing aids or cochlear implants can walk into that room. They flip their hearing aid to what they call the T position or the telecoil position on their hearing aid. And that audio transmission is sent directly right into their hearing aid, just seamlessly, in a very, you might say it's customized or it's of a quality that they typically just do not have the experience of hearing. So we think it's just a great piece of technology that allows individuals with hearing impairments to be on a closer, to hear that same quality sound as those who are not hearing impaired in a very seamless way.
Okay, to give the audience a good idea of how you're changing accessibility, could we talk about the Pentacrest?
Oh, sure.
And how it's been accomplished.
Yeah. So that's a great simple example of greater accessibility. Whereas as before, up on the Pentacrest, we've always had these 2 sets of steps going up to each side, and then in the center there was a sidewalk with no steps.
Right.
So now we have removed those steps, and they're just walkways, just sidewalk walkways that anybody can travel up through now. There's no barrier. Those steps previously caused a barrier, especially in times when we would maybe have performances up there on the Pentacrest, like maybe the Jazz Festival or something. And when that Jazz Festival stage would be up there, for instance, it would block the only accessible route, which was the center route. And so anyway, this, and what I think when I look at that, the sidewalk now with the steps being removed, that looks like it should have always been that way. It just looks like that was I just think it looks great. And we talked earlier about how designs that are accessible and more usable, have other benefits. Well, another benefit to removing those steps is now we can maintain that sidewalk much easier. Our snow removal equipment can now just buzz right through there.
Yes.
Whereas previously they have to stop, they need to hand shovel. So it saves us on, you know, maintenance. I mean, there's other good benefits as well.
And let's say it's not only people with disabilities who benefit, it's anyone. And Brian and I, before the show, we were discussing the amount of packages and goods that are carried onto campus. So when it's accessible, it makes it a lot easier for those packages and goods to be transported to where they need to go.
So yeah, you think of, you know, all the freight, you know, small, large, that gets transported from the street or from the loading dock or whatever into these buildings.
And the mail.
And the mail, you think, and then you think of the power door operator buttons that you see those people using as well. How they can just pull their cart or push their cart in, and without the struggle that they typically would have without that power door operator button.
And a good example of removing steps would be the pedestrian bridge by the IMU.
Yes.
That is real good.
Yeah, so that's a kind of somewhat another flood-related project that we're working on. And now, we're going to have a sidewalk right up to that connecting pedestrian bridge. And while we're doing the construction there, people have maybe noticed how we put on this temporary wood ramp off to the side. That will eventually be removed, the wood ramp. And then we'll have a concrete permanent ramp, and if I remember right, there will also be steps there too. But anyway, it's going to be a much nicer transition onto that bridge.
Speaking of the flood damage several years ago, is there any work coming up related to preventing or trying to curtail flooding from this point on?
Yes, and that's part of the work going on at the IMU area right now. Those, a lot of those, they're actually along the riverfront. There's going to be an outdoor patio, but the wall that supports that outdoor patio is mainly to mitigate future flood. And there will be that wall continues around, and we're also building a lot of what they call invisible walls, where it's basically, you'll see this nice wide sidewalk, but when a flood is possible, we'll be able to put up these walls, temporary walls that will prevent the flood impact, the negative impact the flood has had on us in previous years.
Could you give us a brief description of what is being done in the existing buildings?
Sure.
To make them accessible.
Yep. So we've somewhat been playing a strong role on, a strong focus, I should say, on restrooms, especially facilities that may not have an accessible restroom within them. Last year, for instance, at McLean Hall, we renovated all the restrooms in there, and now every restroom on every floor is wheelchair, accessible. And when we're doing, this is something else that makes me think. When we're doing restrooms, we're also, this is something that the Student Disability Org group on campus kind of worked with us in implementing, is to install just these simple little containers in every bathroom.
Yes.
And what it is what they refer to as a Sharps container. And especially serves well for people who are diabetic and need a place to dispense, dispose of needles. Yeah, a safe place to dispose of those. So it's an inexpensive thing that we make it a standard now that every restroom, we make sure we install one of these Sharps disposal containers in them.
I think people, on the average, don't realize accessibility covers more than getting from here to there. Like that is a good example.
Yep, and as I mentioned, you know, hearing impaired, you know, sometimes I think a lot of people do focus on wheelchair accessibility, and sometimes that, you know, there's hidden, you know, I always think of hearing impairment as a hidden disability.
Yeah, yes.
I mean, you can see a person walk down the street and you don't realize
Right.
that person may be deaf.
Yes.
So yeah, there's the sensory, you know, disabilities, you know, sight impaired, hearing impaired, that, you know, we also try to focus on. Speaking of sight impaired disabilities, we've are experimenting with these audible construction sidewalk alerts, I'll call them. In other words, let's say if we're closing down a sidewalk, we have these audible
Yes.
messages that are to inform a person, you know, hey, the sidewalk is closed ahead, your detour is to cross here, you know, so that they're to get them on a more closer to a level playing field as well, and to because we definitely have a concern for their safety as well as those who are not sight impaired on campus.
I must say that what was done at the old Capitol Center to make it accessible is really fantastic.
Yeah, and that's a very, what do I want to say, very visual part of our
Yes.
campus, you know, so everybody sees that part of our campus,
Yeah.
you know, and again, I thought, well, why didn't we do this years ago? You know, but there's so many things, you know, to do. We have a long ways to go on campus.
Yeah.
We have so many things to improve. I mean, we have, you know, hundreds and of buildings and acres, you know, to maintain. And, you know, obviously many of these buildings were built pre-ADA.
Yes.
And they weren't thinking of accessibility
No.
when they designed those buildings. And it's, you know, it's never easy in existing construction to modify and alter, you know, buildings to make them accessible you know, after they're built. It's much easier to think about it up front in design.
From the ground up.
From the ground up, from the very first time up. We also have, future. You asked earlier about future facilities on the board.
Yes.
We're in the design phase for a new psychology building on campus. We have a new...
Where will that be?
That will be down by Spence Labs, if you're
Okay.
familiar with that,
Yes.
on that corner.
Yes. So that means the building must come down.
Well, not necessarily.
Okay.
There's a parking lot right there in the
Right.
corner is where, and the future of Seashore Hall, which is connected to
Yeah.
Spence Lab, is still somewhat unsure yet of
Right.
if we're going to renovate or tear it
Okay.
down or what we'll do there. So we also have a new College of Pharmacy building that's in the
Yes.
design phase, and that is planned to, once the new dormitory on the west side of campus is built, then the next phase would be to remove the quad dormitory that's there, and that's where the new where a new pharmacy building would be.
By the way, when does the new dorm open?
You know, I'm not for sure on what the scheduled date of that is, if it's for next fall, or I'm not sure what that
When I
scheduled
saw
opening date
it
is.
on the news, it looked pretty well on its way.
Yep, it looks like they're getting ready to close it up for winter and move
Yes.
inside and do work. We're also planning another new dormitory
Really?
alongside the river, down past the IMU, where there's an old water plant right now.
Okay, I know that.
Yep.
Right behind Bird.
Exactly, right behind Burge. So that's also coming up. That we're very early in the design stage of that.
Near the parking ramp.
Yes. Yep. Right next door.
Because I've been here long enough to remember when the Arnold House was sitting there.
Okay, and see, I'm not familiar with that. Yeah.
And then it moved to near Dorm.
Okay.
And now it's moved again.
Okay. Sure. So yeah, we got an awful lot going on, and a lot going on in the future. And as I mentioned earlier, we're trying to think, you know, in design, you know, how can we make our facilities more usable to everyone, whether it be a unisex restroom,
Yes.
or I mentioned hearing loops, or simple things as those sharp disposal containers. And also just to provide a design that that gives dignity to the people
Yes.
who use those facilities, and not to marginalize people by sending them a different route and so on.
Brian, how does the university get some input from the population with disabilities?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that, because I think it's just been like a year and a half ago, we started this Hawkeye Accessibility Ambassador Program. And so what students on campus with disabilities are, you know, welcome to be a part of this Hawkeye Accessibility Ambassador group. And what we've done is then actually during the design of new facilities or major additions, whatever, we invite these Hawkeye Accessibility Ambassadors to the design review meetings to get their input on what works and what doesn't. We think of individuals with specific disabilities are really the experts. They know what works and what doesn't, and I think many times we forget that. We think that we know what's best, and we don't. Sometimes I think we've lacked in asking and getting that input from individuals with disabilities. So this is a program I'm really excited about it. It's working well. The students, I think, enjoy participating in it, and I think it's a win-win for the university, the students, and everybody.
And by doing that, it's almost like a one-time shot.
Well,
instead of redesigning it again.
Mm-hmm. Yep, so there's definitely, if you think in advance in design, if you think of this and do it right at the start, you don't have to provide some accommodation afterwards for somebody and have to tear something down and rebuild it. So there's obviously, a cost savings in doing that as well.
And could you describe how our new technology has helped make things accessible?
Okay. I did mention earlier that hearing loop technology, which is you know, I mentioned it's been around in Europe for many times, but lots of times the United States is just slow to kind of catch on to these things. We're also working, it's really exciting, is there's an app, a phone app that people who are blind or severely visually impaired use, and we are able as the university to supplement the app with additional information. In other words, a blind person could be going down a sidewalk, and we can provide information that it will give him an audible message saying 40 feet, for example, 40 feet, entrance door to the communications center, or 20 feet, bus stop, main library bus stop number 1040 is on your left. Okay. Things that, or we can tell them, for instance, that there's an art sculpture located here, and we can tell them what the name of that piece of art is, who the artist is, who made it. We can tell them where there's steps on a sidewalk on their route. So that's kind of something new we're experimenting with the application developer but it looks very promising. We've obviously we can now provide maps on web pages that individuals can obtain, and we show where maybe accessible features are at on campus, and maybe where non-accessible features are at as far as a non-accessible route. Maybe where power door openers are located on which buildings, the map shows that. Shows where the sidewalk is steep or where there might be steps. So that's been very helpful to, especially as as new students come, to the University of Iowa, it's been helpful to them.
Well, as a person that went to grad school here in the 80s, it's really improved to the point where I can get just about anywhere without asking for help. And mind you, I'm not ashamed of the wheelchair, but it feels good not to be noticed as much as I did when I first came onto campus, especially the old Capitol Center, because they didn't have automatic doors when I got here.
I think that's exactly what I think of too, as designing for somebody's dignity, and not to marginalize people.
Yes.
I mean, so yeah, it's nice, if you don't have to ask for help, and why, I kind of think many times, why would we not design that way? It's kind of hard to, it's kind of great to see how society has changed their way of thinking. The ADA obviously has helped us change our thinking that way, but I think we're learning more and more that it's just the right thing to do anyway. I think it's what we all want to do. And so it's neat to see how society and culture has changed that way.
And as we come to a close, I'd like to remind everyone in the audience, whether disabled or non-disabled, accessibility helps everyone. It helps people with strollers, packages, or heavy-duty machinery to get to where they want to without difficulty. And speaking as a person with a disability, it helps me blend into a society that is out there waiting for us. And Brian, I want to thank you for coming tonight.
Hey, thank you, Keith, for the invitation.
And
my pleasure to be here.
And explaining what accessibility is and what it can do. And before I close, I'd like to say hello to Terry and say, hurry up and get well. Otherwise, see you next week. Thank you. Have a good week. Bye.